Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good day from wherever you're joining, or even good evening. My name is Jaime Giaga. I'm the chair of the Carlos Wilson Book Club, and I'm honored to host this book launch that we're doing for the Exploding Galaxies today. We have a very great program that was developed by Mara Coson, who is currently joining us from Manila. And I think it's 6 a.m. her time. Um, Before we start, I'd like to just give the mic to our president of the Friends of Echo Park Library. Carlos Bulosan Book Club is a project of the Friends group here at Echo Park Library. So James Castillo will introduce himself and say a few words.
Hello, everyone, both here physically with us in historic Filipino town in Los Angeles, and those joining us all over the world. And we thank you again for joining us and helping make this event successful because I believe these novels and these authors are very important to our heritage, our legacy as Filipinos, the Filipino nation all over the world. And we hope that this will be one one of many events like this, promoting our own literature, as well as promoting helping artists, writers um, prosper. Because in Hollywood, in America, it's still a big risk to invest in minority groups like us. But if we continue to help each other and provide that market, that interest, that value, then it makes it easier for the next generation or the next book that gets launched. Just like Jessica Caloza making historic changes and wins here, that will pave the way for future Filipinos to make progress here in the United States and in the culture and issues related to culture and society. These types of events will make a big difference, and bit by bit, we will make an impact. We will make a significant contribution to the world and to the United States and to all Filipinos all over the world. So once again, thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy our programming today. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Mara, the publisher of Exploding Galaxies. Thank you all for attending the event this afternoon. I am so grateful for all of you, whether you're online or in person at Echo Park Library. And I'd also like to thank Jaime and Jocelyn Gayaga and the Carlos Bulosan Book Club, as well as Cecilia Brainard. She has made all of this happen. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Linda Ty Casper. She's dialing in from her home in Massachusetts. I'd also like to acknowledge the Nolledo family, who are also here in person in Echo Park Library. I am so grateful to Linda Ty Casper and her daughter Christina, as well as to Mrs. Nolledo and her children. They've been so supportive of what we've been doing here in the press, and I think without them, I wouldn't even be able to talk about the press at all. So I'd really like to thank them, first of all. Linda will be participating in the Q&A towards the end of the event, and as will I, internet permitting. Please also note that we have limited copies of both our books here today at the library with Cecilia Brainard, and for those online and in the US who cannot make it, please reach out to Cecilia Brainard on Facebook in case she still has copies. Otherwise, you can also find us through our website, www.explodinggalaxies.com. So today I'd like to go through what we do at Exploding Galaxies by way of these two questions. Why we publish, and where to find the lost novel. And then I'll go into how we came to republishing our books, But for the Lovers and The Three-Cornered Sun, what these books are about, who the authors are. After that, I'll have a little treat for everybody. We'll be debuting a video of Linda Ty Casper talking about her life and writing which we have prepared for today's event. Then we'll have readings from both novels, and then we'll finally open up to a Q&A. At Exploding Galaxies, what we do is simple. We republish out-of-print lost classics of Philippine literature. But the question is, why republish? So let's take a quick look at these books. You have The Stories of Estrella Alfon, published by Giraffe Books in 1994. There's Awaiting Trespass, another work of Linda Ty Casper's that was published in 1985, a favorite of hers. And outside fiction, you have Doreen Fernandez's classic essays Sarap from 1998, and Carmen Guerrero Nakbil's only novel, The Rice Conspiracy, in 1992, and more. These are all books of importance, but what do they have in common? They're all books that should be read, but what they also sadly have in common is they're all out of print. And there are many books like this, necessary to read, but extremely hard to find on bookshelves. There are reasons to explain the lulls. Sometimes there are maybe 10 or so copies left with the publisher who holds rights to these books still, and with little foreseeable demand, they don't get reprinted, or the author has long gone, or the publishers have long gone, and there's no committed estate to be found, or publishers who used to publish literature have shifted to prayer books instead. And with the Bible being the most read according to our latest national readership survey, the situation isn't ideal, but it's understandable. So without seeing these books back on shelves, they're out of reach to most readers, and so people don't look for them. And this is how many of them disappear. So how to find a lost Filipino novel? Well, sometimes I think it's even easier to give up than to actually find one. These days, large bookshops carry mainly imported books written in English. And so a lot of the Filipino titles, thank God we have many great new ones, but they're all crammed into a fairly small and narrow section where genres like self-help, political biographies mix in with fiction. Other than when I was trying to look for books during the pandemic, libraries were closed. And of course, if you're in luck, then you'll find the book at an independent bookshop or with a online bookseller, a secondhand online bookseller, or on Facebook Marketplace. But sometimes there's only one copy left, and either it's expensive or it's already been taken. And it is this search for the lost novel that just, I suppose, it always feels a little bit like an alternate universe. Like, why are our best books so difficult to find? And so this is why I started the press. I really wanted to see what I could do to try and change that. I knew I wanted to have a press someday. And because these books were so difficult to access and it didn't make sense to me, I decided to finally just start republishing the books that I could find. I have little experience publishing books, but I decided to go for it anyway. These books have been in limbo for so long, and so it's great now that it's such a great feeling when now people can easily find Nolledo in a bookshop, or they say, who's Nolledo? And then when they find the book, they're like, wow, I didn't know a book like this existed. And then afterwards, they're like, wow, this is one of the best books I've ever read. So at Exploding Galaxies, we want to make sure that our books stay on shelves for as long as possible. And now, I'll take you through two of our books. We launched our press in June 2023, and Wilfrido D. Nolledo's But for the Lovers was the book that we launched with. To me, it's a novel so deeply magnetic and so important, and no matter the challenge that it was for me to read, I truly believe, and I think as many people do, that its place in Philippine literature is undeniable. Nolledo was born in 1933. He grew up in Balik-Balik, Manila, and studied journalism in UST, where he was the editor of the Blue Quill and where he met his wife Blanca. He was not just a novelist, he was equally a well-known scriptwriter, playwright, and short story writer. He won awards in all these categories throughout his career. Many writers wanted to write like him, and probably still do today. In a talk we had last year with Gina Apostol, she said, "Reading Nolledo, up the ante, he is so gloriously himself, bent on doing art on his own terms. For a writer, that kind of centeredness, centering on what we desire and need to do as an artist, is so important to me. And so for me, that is influential. It's radical, and it's pleasurable to see and read, and it is generative. Reading Nolledo is always generative. It makes me want to write." Nolledo worked with Nick Hookin in the Free Press from 1963 to 66, and after he took a fellowship to study in Iowa Writers' Workshop. He published But for the Lovers with E.P. Dutton in 1970. He returned to Manila in the early 70s, worked on movie scripts, publications. In his life, he wrote 3 more novels, and one of them, Jackie Onassis, who at the time was a publisher at Dutton, almost published. He left again in the 80s to the US, where he died in California in 2004. Why is this book important? In the last few decades, many have hardly heard of Nolledo outside literature classes, where they teach us short stories and this novel, which many say is one of the best works of Philippine literature ever written. You can see it in the absolute and relentless triumph of language that Nolledo was able to accomplish through this book. Writing in English, with Tagalog and Spanish thrown in, with wordplay excellently executed in all these languages. As Ninoch Carrasco said, he used English as a Philippine language, one reflective of the multi-layers of the archipelago's culture, and hence more capable of expressing the passion, rage, and confusion of the Filipino's colonized soul. There is really no novel out there like this, and for this book not to be available in the Philippines for the last 50 years needed an urgent correction. The book is set in World War II Manila. Manila was nearly reduced to smithereens by the war between Japan and America, Manila being a stage for battle. If Manila was a stage, it was as though Nolledo carefully cast his characters as if it were a play. Just hours after the attack in 1941 on Pearl Harbor, Japan launched an air raid on the open city of Manila, catching the Filipino and American forces unprepared. This began the Japanese colonial regime in the Philippines for several brutal years, until Douglas MacArthur returned. And this battle to wrest the Philippines away from the Japanese killed tens of thousands of Filipinos and destroyed 80% of Manila. If bombs were dropped from the air, you can imagine down below, it was absolute blood and chaos and violence. America and Japan were desperate to redeem themselves through victory at our expense. And this is the setting of But for the Lovers. But for the Lovers follows the lost and ghostly mystery that is Alma, as she lives in Ojos Verdes boarding house together with an aging Spanish clown, Hidalgo de Anuncio, who cares for her like a sick doll, and Hidalgo's sidekick, the street thief Amaran Molave, who in some ways becomes a shadow attached to Alma. Beyond them, you can encounter characters like the blonde, blue-eyed American soldier Jonas Winters, who Alma falls in love with, the maniacal Major Shigura, and everyone else in the story who symbolized more than just colonizing powers, but also sentiments and responses to the war, personified in other characters. As Gina Apostol writes in the foreword, this book is a marvel. It cuts no corners. It knows its purpose. Like the best of our Filipino novels, like Noli Me Tangere, it is sui generis. It comes seemingly from nowhere to speak an experience of trauma unspeakably Filipino. It marks its ambition by its existence. The idea to publish Linda Ty Casper actually came upon the recommendation of writer and academic Caroline Howe. She told me to look into The Peninsulars, which is Linda Ty Casper's first novel that she had written in 1964. But it was really her second novel, The Three-Cornered Sun, that caught my attention. I knew I had to publish it. So I tried to look for Linda Ty Casper, and somehow I found the email of her daughter, Christina, And then so I just sent her an email out of the blue, and I'm so thankful that she replied, and so did Linda. When I started to go about trying to figure out how to publish Linda T. Casper's The Three-Cornered Sun, I actually found the last few remaining copies of the 1979 edition at the bottom shelf of New Day. And so, New Day at this point, I think, has focused primarily on prayer books. And I suppose because there were still a few more copies left, I think that a book like The Three-Cornered Sun would have remained unpublished for much longer. So what I decided to do was buy the last few copies, start working on our own edition, which we had the blessing of Linda T. Casper for. Linda T. Casper was born in 1931 in Malabon, and she grew up listening to stories from her grandmother about the 1896 Revolution and the Philippine-American War. When she was about to enter university, she went to the history department and they told her, go across the law, and if they reject you, then you can study history. Well, unfortunately, they did accept her at UP Law, and she graduated from there. And then after that, she married the American literary critic, Leonard Casper, in 1956. And then moved to Harvard, where she graduated among the earlier batches of women to graduate at Harvard Law. She wrote her first historical novel, The Peninsulars, in 1964, and then she wrote The Three-Cornered Sun over the span of 10 years in different cities, and she published that finally in 1979. And then in the 80s and the 90s, she was also well known for the novels that she had written that were critical of the Marcos period, including Dream Eden, Small Party in a Garden, and Fortress in the Plaza, and a few others. And now she's based in Massachusetts, an hour outside Boston, in a home that she's lived in since the 60s, and she still continues to write. The Three-Cornered Sun is set in Manila in 1896. Let's go back further in time and set the scene. In 1815, the galleon trade sailed its last ship. In 1833, Cuba and Puerto Rico, besides us, remained under Spanish rule. British capital and Chinese agricultural exports, which led to haciendas and tenant farmers. In the 1860s, educational reforms taught us the Spanish language and gave rise to the Ilustrados. The Spanish friars were holding on to their power, clutching it cruelly, and they wedged their self-interest between the many reforms coming in from Spain and also the increasing unrest from the population. In 1892, the Katipunan was formed, fueled into action by the ideas of Rizal and by the leadership of Bonifacio. In 1895, the Cuban Revolution began, and in 1896, ours. But as leadership passed from Bonifacio to Aguinaldo, who was not able to fight off the Spaniards, there was the Biak na Bato Republic. But then that revolutionary leadership exiled to Hong Kong. It is considered to be a failed revolution, except with one victory, that we had finally started to form the identity of the Philippines. As the historian Ambeth Ocampo wrote in his blurb, the 1896 revolution is a story Filipinos know all too well. In one dimension, from textbook history, given a new lease on life, the novel speaks to a new generation that will hopefully ensure the present and the future will stop reading like the past. The novel follows the Villardo family, with 4 brothers, their wives, and their children, and how different they all wanted the future to be. It's 1896, and there are louder and louder calls for revolution. Interesting to note that Rizal is actually, in this novel, on a boat waiting to leave for a medical mission in Cuba, and yet he is sought to look at the matriarch's eyes. Simeon returned from exile from failed reforms that he had tried to push in Spain and is jaded. Angel, his brother, is an entrepreneur, motivated to remain in good graces with the state and church. And Blas is like a balimbing, a gambler, an opportunist. And his son, And Blas's son Cristobal, who we follow more closely in the novel, wants to fight for Philippine independence. Ultimately, we watch him come to terms with the bitterness of what Manolo Quezon writes, that the revolution itself was a confrontation between Filipinos. I was just so taken by the novel, so transported to the heat and dust of the moment, especially early on in the bull ring, where there was going to be a fight between a bull and a tiger. And Cristobal was actually right underneath the bleachers, hiding with his gun already aimed at the Governor General. And meanwhile, his uncle, fresh from exile, was just about to stop him. It is a stunning capture of the 1896 revolution through a family divided by their own wishes and expectations, inside a nation that was just beginning to see itself. So, encouraged by the recent interest in this novel, but also through the recent republishing efforts of Cecilia Brainard and Ateneo Press for Linda T. Casper, I am told that she has finally completed her memoir. With that said, I'd like to now show you the video of Linda T. Casper that we had produced so that we could debut it in this event. Thank you again to everyone for taking the time to listen to me talk about Exploding Galaxies and our 2 books. We're really excited for what we have next year, so please keep an eye out for our future releases. Thank you very much.
I'm Linda T. Casper, and I'm a writer. I write mostly historical fiction so that we won't forget who we are or what we went through, and we'll know what to be when the time comes to make the choices. You know, I don't write regularly. I don't plan to write, but I do a lot of research. I do a lot of reading, and I take notes. So I think things lead to another, and although I might be doing something else, I might be at a meeting, I might be digging weeds, planting, cooking, and I make good relleno. Suddenly an idea would come to me, and if I'm not too involved with what I'm doing, I'll sit down and write it, stay with it until it's complete. When I start, I never know how it will end. That's not a very practical way of doing it, but that's the only way I could write. One word leads to another until the end, and then all I have to do is to revise. And that's the way with my short stories. So my chapters in my books are short. They're like short stories. They come to me unplanned. I mean, practically wrote themselves. I don't remember. Sometimes I read a book, I don't remember writing it. It just, maybe I typed it, but yeah, I kept typing and typing and typing, and NVM said, enough revising, you, too much, I'll take it. Took my first manuscript, Peninsulars, brought it to Bookmark, and they published it. Because if I sat down to write, Hemingway said, sit down and write the first word, the, and it will become whatever. I can't do that. If I write the, I look at the page, there's nothing happening, you know. So that's the way I write. I mean, I don't make myself write. I don't know how long I've been writing. I don't know. I remember when I was preparing for the bar, I wrote some stories, I think. One was about a farmer whose land was unregistered, because he didn't know he had to register. It was in his family for years and years. And the family, I could tell you the name, but I won't, registered it in their name. So they lost their land. I was kind of trying to make things right because my grandmother told us a lot of stories about the Revolution, the American War. And maybe I really didn't want to be a lawyer because remember I wanted to enroll in history. I think I am now my grandmother telling stories. And she would be happy if she knew that. She died in 1953. She had good stories. But I'm writing for the young people who didn't have a nanay to tell them stories about the war and the revolution. Because otherwise we'll be caught up in Hollywood kind of stories. Other countries have their own stories, but we should have, by right, our own stories and write it ourselves. That's why. I think it's kind of an excuse maybe that I don't want to do something else. See, I don't need things anymore. And I don't know how long I'll be here. I can't see that well. I can't walk. I'm 93. Those are all the ingredients for and passing away. Do you know, I wake up early and I look up and the sun shines through the pine trees or the trees, and I look and kind of close my eyes. It's like a monstrance. And sometimes I'm watching Mass and the swans come by. I like the swans because they're quiet. I'm sitting there watching the birds and I can see the blue heron walking, stalking. And now and then I see a kayak. Sometimes I'm able to start the day with a grateful heart, and that's what I think is the best way to do it. No matter what happens during the day. Sometimes it's just lousy, but I'm grateful. I'm a kind of private person. I mean, I will be friendly, but I won't go out and seek people, you know. We write for noble ideas. We don't have to strut. So I just write. That's all I do. I write quietly, and people don't even know I write because a lot of people say, "Oh, I didn't know you write." I said, "Well, I'm not going around saying I write. I mean, what's the point? I'm doing it really not to be known. I don't have to be known. But the books, I want to be known because it's about us. It's us. We should remember our country, I think. I still think when people ask me, "Are you American?" I said, "No, I'm Filipino." I haven't, for some reason, I think it's because of Nanay. That's what I am. And so I want to remember as much of what happened in our history, which I can't anymore. I can't read anymore. You know, I wish I had started earlier than the Peninsulars, but I didn't have any material. I wish I had written, oh, but somebody will do it eventually. They will find new material somewhere, hidden somewhere in one of those old Malabon houses. I still think there is some material that to be discovered, and I hope they're discovered and they're protected and they are written about, because we have to, in a world that's changing, that is not really very pro-Filipino, I don't think. We have to fight for ourselves, and fighting for ourselves is writing our stories and writing what we remember so it will be part of the country's memory. Not just our memory, but everybody's memory. And that way history can be revised. Because otherwise we would disappear. I think once I said, history is the biography of the country, but literature is the autobiography. It's our story. And if we don't write our story, somebody else will write it for us.
So we will proceed with our two readings. The first one by Noel Alumet. And please introduce yourself before you do your reading. And then to be followed by Renee Brafalda, who will do the second reading, the book by Linda Ty Casper. So
All right, good. First, I just want to acknowledge the Nolledo family for being here. Thank you. What a joy it is to be reading for you. Also, I've known Noel actually for quite a little bit, so it's really wild. I'm almost kind of now. I'm embarrassed to be reading this. It's about the actual thing. But I will soldier on. I will soldier on. All right. I'll be reading the prologue. And I've asked to be timed so I don't go over. Prologue.
say something about yourself.
Oh, you want me to say about myself? My name is Noel Alumet.
I read a couple of books.
I too am an author.
What did you read?
One is called, my first one was called Letters to Montgomery Clift, published over 20 years ago. My second novel was published 2006, 2007. It was called Talk to the Moon. It'll be reissued next year, actually, so that'll be available. My most current book is a collection of short stories called Music Heard in Hi-Fi. For those of you who don't know, Hi-Fi, short historic Filipino town, where we're actually located. So it's a short story collection that had been previously published elsewhere, and it came out last year. So truly grateful to be reading this work. I just want to be clear, it's Nolledo, right? Or Nolledo? Nolledo.
Check with my mom.
Nolledo. Okay, we're discussing what the actual name is. Nolledo. Okay, but for the low lovers, prologue. He was beginning to eat flowers, and the crescent moon was in his eyes when he awoke again. One night long ago, when they had intercepted a code from the enemy on the shortwave and had not needed him anymore, they pulled out their tents, mantled him with leaves, and left him. They left him a rifle, a bury basket, and a book of psalms. For the major had decreed defense of this murder. Let the little legionnaire lie here and die. It is written. It shall be read. But the boy went on sleeping and did not die, and when he awakened, it was to find himself alone. A bird, a white-winged Maya dart in front of the west, in from the west, perhaps headed for the monsoon. Steadying the Springfield, he cocked the hammer with a quivering thumb and waited. It flew away, whatever it was, and now he squinted up and remembered that it was the first time in a long spell he had seen the sky. And he thought, it is longer, lonelier, and lovelier than any of my prayers. He sighted the nimbus, an eagle in captivity, and fired. Lord, he said, I'm punching holes in your garret. Glang, glang, glang. Is that a guitar somewhere? He asked out loud. It was not music he heard, only himself. Days passed. When he was hungry, which was always, he drank brook water. When he was not hungry, which was never, he siphoned the brook water. Made heron-beaked winged planes out of old newspapers from his knapsack, which also contained a ping-pong ball, a bolo, and a pair of scissors. It had become his habit to glare back at the sun. As he did, he realized that the solar system had dilated eyes, an endless ego. I just have to say that's a beautiful sentence. I just think that's a beautiful sentence. As he did, he realized that the solar system had dilating eyes, an endless ego. So now he only stared at the moon. How whimsical it is, he reflected, and how infinitely tender. Now recalling, the fifth colonists devouring goat kidneys in the market, unholy Moses, the dynamite they planted, the Japanese bower that had eviscerated not the saboteurs, but only the Mandarin chef who was boiling asparagus. The aircraft painted with 2 red ciphers on each wing swooped down gracefully, noiselessly from a blazing easel one morning to strafe dung gorges in the rice fields and the bees and the butterflies engraved on verdant flames. And even the cabbages, calmly, peacefully. He had watched all this from a veranda, smiling like an idiot. The company Sawbones, who got uproariously drunk on its 10th anniversary, of revamping a corporal wall lengthwise with a razor, attaching a gomama, I don't know this word, gomamala to the man's esophagus, sewing up the mess again with safety pins. The patient, sure enough, had expired swiftly of floral hemorrhage. Demented in the marshes in the moonlight, he thought he saw a deer enshroud it. It was a girl wearing an army trench coat. She howled. He climbed an acacia tree to seek safety from his dreams. Midnight. He felt her tugging at his shoes. Centipede! Centipede! She shrieked. They grappled with a beastie. Pulling out the bolo from the knapsack, he darted slash, slash, slash in the thicket. Chuckling, he dropped the blade and examined the bulk of the man. An army lay unsocketed. He grabbed it and flogged the perforated body, the solar plexus, the vertebra, the collarbone. Wake up, he ordered. No comment. He towed it into the river, genuflected, and commented to the bride. In the morning, while he was watching, the girl disrobed. The corpse swam to the surface like a crocodile. He hauled it and kindled a fire around it. We can get up now, he said cheerfully. Still, the carcass demurred. Burrowing a hole in the mud near his sentinel sight, he crammed this amoeba in. He noticed the length of its remaining arm and dug another pit. The wrist stuck out. He chopped it off the bolo and deposited it into another smaller hole. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Noel. So we have our next reader, which will be Reme.
My name is Reme Grafalda. I used to work in the Library of Congress, and now I'm retired. And it's a pleasure to read this excerpt from Linda T. Casper's work, and I thank you for asking me to do it. Do I start? Could I have some instruction?
Yes, you can start now. Thank you for doing this.
Okay. Simeon Viardo kept himself awake by counting the panes of Capiz in each window panel. It was just turning light outside, and the shape of things were still formed by the darkness. Very hear the shots, then Dr. Jose Rizal would be dead. He wondered why executions were held before the sun could mount the trees, when nightfall was their more proper setting. Toribio Nin had fallen asleep again in the large wicker armchair. where he sat throughout the night's vigil for Don Jose. Their praying could not hold off his sleep, faltering the way the lights marking the channel dimmed and brightened in the bay. His breathing rose and fell, and yet he had tried to share their sympathies as far as he understood them, out of gratitude to Simeon, who gave him shelter. Simeon waited for prayers to resume as soon as Paz returned to kneel before their small altar. The servants sat against one another at the doorway, their bodies welded together in sleep, unable to stay fully awake, if only to observe silence. His mother appeared to be saying her beads, although her voice, in its evenness, could not be distinguished from her sighing. She responded to her own prayers, rocking in her chair, as though that were necessary to intensify her pleas that Don Jose be saved, through a miracle if need be. Although now and then it was Cristobal's name that she uttered, and sometimes Blas. The wife of Don Tomas San Gabriel had sent word that Cristobal had been into their farm in Batangas. Fermin alone seemed to be awake to the smallest movement in the house, following each with widely open eyes, pushing the beads he had been given between his forefinger and thumb with the quickness of birds pecking grain. Simeon could not tell what his son thought, had stopped improvising situations that would force the boy to speak. His time was now spent writing manifestos for the revolution, in case he was summoned to speak for it. Calling out number pairs for the lottery in his dreams, Blas Viardo slept fitfully. He came in the day before, in the midst of the family prayers. Since the state of his spiritual life could cancel the effectiveness of their efforts, no one asked him to join them at the altar. He watched them for a while, trying to appear agonized. In fact, he was as distraught as he had ever been, having failed to speak to the new Governor General about the embargo on Amparo's property and that of her brother Raul in Nueva Ecija. Angel would not intercede, refusing to use on behalf of anyone the grace he might later need for himself. Blas remonstrated in his sleep, trying to make Amparo see that he had exerted himself as strenuously as he could. For half the day, he had stood outside the palace gate at Malacañang, along with the sisters and mother of Don Jose, who hoped that Canovas would wire a pardon at the last minute while the liberals were still in power. There was rumor that the liberals were trying to have Don Jose appointed to the Cortes to represent a small province of the peninsula in order to bestow upon him the rights of immunity. Blas winced in his sleep, thinking that Amparo would say he should have begged for an audience. To beg was to tempt refusal. The request had to be extended as an invitation to partake of mutual generosities. He turned in the bed, twisting the bedclothes and the mosquito netting until the corners broke and fell upon him. He stretched the netting over his face with his arms, trying to return to sleep. In a way, he was glad he failed, for he had no affection for Raul, who refused firmly to return his mola or to allow him at least to join the siege at Angat and Kalumpit. The netting trapped his breath, and he got up to curse. Raoul said he would only become impatient, might leave without taking the bother to let anyone know. The same excuse, perhaps, that Cristobal gave himself, refusing to let him join the attack in San Juan. They were the ones who did not know what courage was. Suppose both became generals? The possibility made Blas feel he had been bypassed, unless he won at Monte soon, he would have nothing to be grateful for. The arched crowing of cocks answering each other from boats tied to riverbanks, stone backyards, and farm huts preceded the church bells. Simeon pulled himself up from his chair, finding himself almost asleep. He had never felt this tired before. Bringing a cup of chocolate for Fermin, Paz asked him if he would break his fast too. No, he said, walking up to the window for air. The light was rising, reaching the way wax spread its saintly odors. Another day, and it would be 1897. 3 more years, and they entered into the next century. Time passing did not wait for his hopes. Has the crowd gathered? His mother heard him move. It has. His throat was tight with thirst, but he would not drink until it was all over. By some intuition, Paz served fish the night before, as she did for the vigils for holy days. That morning, however, she did not think of telling the servants to delay making breakfast. The odors of cooking broke his fast. Who has gathered where and what? Blas got up, thoughts still coiled about himself from having awakened too often in the night. He was dressed to go out, thinking of the possibility of placing himself once more before the new Governor General's gates. He poured himself some wine to wash the bitter taste in his mouth. Everyone, how was it possible? Everyone was still wrapped in their prayers. Paz was kneeling at a small table covered with dark cloth. Black sashes held the curtains in place. If, after all, the pardon came, would they be disappointed? Maybe the revolutionarios would rescue Don Jose as he was being taken from the fort of Santiago. That would be something to see. But anything would summon him from a house bent on enjoying its sorrow. Through the early silence, a bugle and drum pushed their sounds beyond the point of breaking. Toribionin lifted himself out of sleep, trying to sort out the lights of blooming softly on the candles. He was reminded of his intention to watch the execution. Out of courtesy, he asked Simeon to accompany him, knowing he would be dismissed, and indeed refused. Simeon excused himself. There was no pleasure in seeing another man die, another man in whom he had placed his hopes and he himself could not fulfill. Yet all this was his fault. If he had allowed Cristobal to shoot the Governor General in his bull ring, there would have been no need, perhaps, for the revolution. No need to have Don Jose returned from Barcelona to be executed. Unable to catch the leaders of the revolution, the Castilla was executing Don Jose, who had twice refused to sanction revolt. The sum of everything he touched was wrong. Blas saw his opportunity to leave the house without having to improvise another excuse. repelled by women who sought solace in their beads and in misery, he often wondered if wicked thoughts ever penetrated Paz's devotion. He presented himself to Toribio Nin. "Wait, Nin!" The cochero was not in the stable, though the horse was there, gnawing at the walls in the absence of his bucket. Blas had no desire to harness the horse himself. "We could walk, Nin. The air is still cool. It'll give us an appetite for breakfast afterward." His mind was on which of the houses he knew was likely to spread the most delectable feast after the execution. He would try all of them. Once outside the house, they began arguing about the quickest way to the fields of Bagumbayan, where the executions were performed. Carriages darted through the street, hurrying as if for the bull ring. The horses were neatly trimmed. It promised to be an impressive crowd. Nin finally agreed to take the Paseo Maria Cristina by cutting the Plaza de Palacio. They might meet the prisoner there and be able to come as close to him as the friars and the artillerists would allow. Cobblestones were still wet from the morning dampness. They walked quickly across from the Ayuntamiento and Catedral, measuring each other's stride, overhearing speculations that His Excellency would attend with all his generals. At the corner shrine, a candle had run into wax. The holy face painted on the stone was powdery with soot, looked asleep. Reaching the gate of Postigo near the Archbishop's palace, with its intricate facing of windows and eaves, they found out that Don Jose had just passed, wearing the Virgin's blue token, a black rosary on one arm. His hands were tied behind his back. They hurried forward without consulting one another. In Blas's mind, there began forming thoughts of rescuing Don Jose by himself, therefore taking the revolution from Raul. He looked about to see if there were any revolutionarios who might foil his plan with their own attempt. But what would he do afterward? Yellow and scarlet bandera españolas, soft petals not yet frayed by sunlight, distracted Blas on the Paseo of Maria Cristina. In their hurry to reach the field, Blas and Nin got separated. On the bulwarks and along the walls, early parties had staked positions of advantage. Blas scanned their faces and, recognizing Victoria, threaded his way to her. The effort made him sweat, so before reaching the steps, he carefully wiped his face and pulled up his silk hose. Once on the wall, he felt separated from the crowd below, forgot the act of daring he was planning, forgot Toribio Nin, who could not push through the crowd by himself. Anchored by the bodies of Victoria and her friends, Angel refused to appear and commit himself one way or the other with his presence. Blas stretched for a view beyond the sunken field. They competed in being first to recognize the Lightfoot Regiment and the volunteer brigades. There was part of the Indio Regiment, the number 73. A gasp, the same astonishment that accompanied the unveiling of miraculous statues sucked in the air as Don Jose entered the square formed by the soldiers. There was a brief argument about whether Don Jose would allow himself to be blindfolded and shot in the back. The lampposts were pale, blinded by the paler sky. The sky reminds me of the bad passage I had through the Suez. Vittoria pressed the perfumed handkerchief to her face. Long before breakfast, the passengers began fainting from the heat. She fanned herself furiously and frivolously with it, summoning Blas closer to be able to tell him that in his zeal for the king, Leon had advanced his regiment at Binakayan and was condemned. He was not even supposed to be in the battle lines. Senora, the next time, choose winter time for crossing the Mediterranean. One of Victoria's friends scraped the moss off the limestone. The Red Sea, is not red, hardly pink. He spoke for the benefit of those who had not traveled. It's only the seaweeds underneath that give it the semblance of color. Enough! Enough for the moment. Those intent on watching demanded silence. Look! Quickly, look! Victoria pointed, her hand displaying a new ring, emeralds and rubies surrounded by brilliance. The Indio soldiers were raising their Remingtons. The Castilla behind them had their rifles cocked in case the Indios mutinied. People pressed forward, anxious to see what they would not otherwise believe. Watching her ring catch the light, Victoria thought vaguely of Don Jose's wife, whom she had met at a reception before it was considered dangerous to associate with her. She would probably be returning to Hong Kong or Ireland, where she was born. Then she thought of herself, exacting pity for her own situation. She might forever be stranded in Filipinas. Hopes no longer guided her life. When the guns fired, there was no more reality for her than there was in the make-believe place where firecrackers were lit to simulate gunshots. Blas was busy looking out to the sea beyond Corregidor, dreaming of his own passage. The century was ending. Perhaps the new one would find him in the peninsula. Looking for landmarks, he did not see Don Jose fall and turned deliberately to face the sky upon touching the earth. The sun rose like a twisted flower. Blas continued to watch himself while the body of Don Jose was taken away to be buried in a secret place.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank
And
you.
we will try to get everybody into the gallery mode. So I will be moderating this part of the program, which we call Q&A, but I'd like to make it a conversation for all of us. So I can see people here in the in-person. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your hand. I have James on the computer who will identify from the gallery if you want to speak. When you do, please unmute yourself and you will show up as a speaker. So given those guidelines, do we have anybody who would like to make a comment? Yes, in fact, I would like to ask Mara, can you say something? And please introduce to the audience here, both virtually and in person, the two families whose books we are honoring and launching today.
Um, first, I'd like to actually thank Noel, for reading the prologue. It's very challenging to read that, and you did it so well. And to Reme Grafalda, wow, the book came alive again, in my head, and it was such a powerful reading. So thank you both for the readings.
Thank you.
And yes, so I also just wanted to acknowledge that Mrs. Nolledo is in the room. She's been a great supporter of Exploding Galaxies, especially by entrusting her late husband's book to us. And of course, Mimi, Ruel, and Orly. Thank you so much.
Well, just wave, the wave, so no. Go.
This is as far as he's gonna get.
Okay.
And then again on screen, dialing in from Massachusetts is Linda T. Casper. And Christina is somewhere in the background, I believe. And so thank you also so much. And it's also been great to be entrusted with the Three-Cornered Sun. So thank you both for being here. I believe Thelma Arambulo had a question. We can start with that.
Yes, Thelma, and make sure you unmute yourself and just as soon as we can hear you, we'll give you the go ahead.
Nope, she's still muted.
Still muted.
Okay. I'm Thelma Arambulo. I'm a retired professor of University of the Philippines in Diliman. I got into your whole world there in California through Cecilia, because Cecilia was the grade school classmate of my sister. So I'm really very grateful. And for this particular discussion, I am really very happy to discover Exploding Galaxies. And if I'm not mistaken, you're in the Philippines?
Yes.
Are you in the?
Yes, we're based
Oh,
in.
good. I'm so looking. Are you in Manila?
Yes. Yeah, dialing in.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to looking for your bookstore or wherever you are. Because after college, and I think in the 70s and the 80s, I still would look for titles from New Day and Anvil, because they were the ones who were the first to really concentrate on literary titles. When I was a college student and I couldn't afford to buy books, I used to collect the stories of the 1960s fictionists published in the Free Press, in Graphic, and in Weekly Nation. I had collections. I had whole collections. And later on, that proved to be good. I kept those collections, and Karina Bolasco, who is a publisher, once asked me for my collection of the short stories published in the magazines of our national artist, Rizil Juarez. And I was able to lend it to her, give it to her. Anyway, I'm so looking forward to visiting you and your bookstore. I'm so excited to see your titles, because if I had copies of those before when I was a student, I don't have them anymore. and I'd like to especially buy copies of the fiction, and even if the poetry, if you have them, of the writers that I enjoyed when I was in college, and continued to enjoy them because I taught them in my classes. Thank you very much. And of course, I'm very excited about your republishing of Linda T. Casper's novels, because I was really an early fan of hers when I discovered the historical novels, because oh my God, I think she's the only, at that time, Filipina writer in English who was doing historical novels. And her historical novels were of a time that was not contemporaneous to her, because some of the historical novels being written by our Filipino writers today and in the past maybe 20 years were of periods in which they lived, like the martial law era. That was a very popular topic for the novels. So thank you very much. I'm enjoying this and the readings too. Thank you, Cecilia, for the invitation. And I will continue to listen to you. I'm really happy about it. I mean, I'm missing my usual dinner time, but it's okay. It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so great. I'm so happy that you actually attended this session. It's so nice to hear from you, especially since you have taught literature. And it's interesting because it's nice that you've been collecting like weeklies from the 60s and stories and poetry. We're only at the moment 2 books in. We're actually continuing to acquire new titles in the coming years. So no bookstore yet, but we do plan to have several more books, including
Oh,
a book
good.
of poetry next year. And if you ever have any requests, please let us know. And when you're ever in Manila as well, I'd love to meet up.
Yeah, I will look for you. I will certainly look for you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I love your video, your interview of Linda T. Casper. And I tried to take a video of it on my cell phone because I didn't know how to do it on my iPad. I'm doing this. I'm watching you right now on my iPad, and I don't know how to video what I'm watching at the same time. So I was there with my cell phone taking a
We have
video of the interview, Linda T. Casper. Thank you very much. Beautiful.
I put a link on the of the YouTube video as well in the chat box. We're going to try after debuting it here today. We're gonna try to also make sure that um as many people as possible see the video.
It's a beautiful video, by the way. It's good. And
Thanks to Linda T. Casper.
and the
She
first time, I mean, I saw photos of her when she was much younger, when she was in the 60s. But this is the first time I've seen her as she looks today. And she's lovely. She is lovely. She is. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Rochelle Scheffler.
Hi, how are you? Hi, Cecilia. Hi, Noel. Hi, Jamie. I'm sorry I couldn't make it in person today, but I'm glad you had the option to Zoom in. So thank you to Exploding Galaxies. This is really exciting. Every time I have family visiting from the Philippines, I always give them a list of books. And my go-to so far, there's a bookstore in Baguio City where I'm from. It's called Mount Cloud,
Yes.
yeah, in Manila, I send them to National Bookstore and La Solidaridad. So now I have one more resource. So thank you so much for that. I found some of Cecilia's books, which are not available here from, I think it was National Bookstore where my nephew found Behind the Walls with Ming Coben. So I'm really happy that you had this presentation. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks as well. And yes, Mount Cloud is also an incredible bookshop. They have such a great selection of Filipino titles. So it's also Mount Cloud actually has been such a great place to find titles that thankfully I realized, okay, they're actually still in print.
You know, if you might also check with the library at St. Louis University. They have a 6th floor library, and that was my favorite place in college. It's they have a huge collection of books there.
Oh, yeah, I should. Yeah, next time I'm in Baguio, I should do
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Do we have any questions here in person or comments? No one? Anybody online? Raise your hand or just unmute yourself and start speaking. You will, somebody, yeah, who's that raising their hand? go ahead and speak.
Sorry, it's me again. I forgot to mention that when I started teaching in UP, I started my research in Filipina women writers in English. And I was very happy to know about Cecilia because she was the she was the youngest at that time, the youngest of the Cebuana writers in English. I was doing a lot of work on Estrella Alfon and Lina Espina Moore. And then I needed I needed a younger writer. I needed the present generation of writers at that time, present in the 80s, because I'm sure there are a few more today. But Cecilia, I was happy to find out that she was writing very well and writing fiction, because fiction is my preferred genre. And so I read as much as I could of what she had written, her short stories and her novel. And I included her in a bio profile that I wrote for an encyclopedia of post-colonial writers. So Cecilia is there together with Estrella Alfon and Lina Espina Moore. So I was really happy to find Cecilia because she helped me look for our own Cebuano writers in English. Thank you, Cecilia. And continue writing more novels.
I think maybe
There's a question.
oh, okay.
Take the mic.
Mirna, Director of the Community Empowerment Department of the Philippine It's more for the Harris Production Book Club. Are we going to have this in the collection? On the line? What are the plans with this book?
Oh, absolutely. We will have copies in the collection, and I will do that after to make sure I get hard copies. So yes to your answer. Ruel, okay.
Yes.
Ruel, Nayed.
What your mom went.
Oh.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you very much to Mara and the Exploding Galaxies team. I think we our family is very, we guard our father's words very much. And when we met with her, we could feel her passion, her excitement about not just the endeavor, but the words. And we're truly appreciative that she's embarked on this project, and can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Thanks, Ruel.
Also, I'd like Cecile to talk about your work, the different projects you've been doing, and share with us. I think everybody knows you, so we want to hear it direct from you.
Yeah.
I think I bombarded my friends for information to show up today or else. But thank you. And can I be heard?
Yeah.
Yes. I always feel that there's a tribe, that you belong to a tribe. And I have always felt members of the tribe here. The Carlos Bulusan Club, the Gayagas, Jaime, Noel, Mara. The first time I met her, there was just this instant kind of connection and just an ease. And of course, Linda T. Casper has become not just a mentor, but a good friend. I know Melissa Nolledo. So the tentacles, the connections extend, and I am just really very happy that I see Hope Sabampanyu is in there. She's from Cebu. She got up at 6 o'clock in the morning to join us. So a lot of people woke up or surrendered their dinner or whatever to be with us. Thank you very much. So I'm not going to talk so much about being a writer because people probably know that I've been doing this since the 1980s, according to Dr. Angulo. But one of the other things that I do aside from writing and editing is I publish books. This is something that I inherited from a group that I had co-founded. It was PAWA, Philippine American Women Writers and Artists. And so we were a group of 7, and we did fun things. But one of the things we did was we started to publish. And so we did some children's books. We did a couple of historical books, an anthology. But as things happened, as the group disbanded. And when it disbanded, I really hated to let that publishing house go because we already had a little publishing thing going. So at first it was Susan Montepillo and I, another member and I, who sort of worked together. And then Susan also had her life. And so I inherited this publishing house, so to speak. I gave it another name, Philippine American Literary House. And it's a small press, and it's not super ambitious, but I pick my titles. And so, for instance, one of my titles is, again, thanks to Linda T. Casper, who always just indulges me with my book projects and anything I ask from Linda, blurbs, introduction. So this is Linda's a collection of a novella and short stories, a river, one woman, deep stories. And what I try to do, because I know I'm a small press and I want these books available in the Philippines, because they are really Filipino books, is I try my best actually to connect my authors with press over there. And in this case, I connected Linda with the University of Santo Tomas publishing house. And so there is an edition by University of Santo Tomas of this one. And then another book I did of Linda, because Linda indulges me, is a book that she calls her husband's memoirs. It's a really beautiful book. She collected the writings to and from her husband, the critic, Leonard Ralph Casper. And she titled it, Will You Happen Past the Silence Through the Dark? And I said, Linda, can we add this? Remembering Leonard Ralph Casper. And it's very powerful in the sense that it collects Len's, and I'm a little bit fresh calling him Len because this is Dr. Leonard Casper, the famous Leonard Casper. His letters that he wrote or that he got, and it includes letters from Ben's Art, our famous writers, Bienvenido and Santos, NVM Gonzalez, anyone, Crepusson, anyone who's a who's who in Philippine lit is in here because that was what Len did. He was a conduit between Philippine lit and American lit, so to speak. This was an important thing that he did. And of course, it has personal information as well, his letters, his about his children growing up and so on. So Linda, thank you for trusting me with these books. And Linda has trusted me again with another book that I'm currently working on, or my pal is working on, in her memoirs. And so that will be coming out next year. And so I'm a little bit like Mara, except Mara's got more resources. She's got an actual staff and so on. But we're a little bit crazy in that sense that we try to keep this books going and try to get it out there. So I'm just just really happy. Mara entrusted to me, she sent it from the Philippines because as of now, her hard copy books are not yet available in the States. And so we do have some copies. And as Mara mentioned, if anybody online, just contact me and I'll arrange to get it over to you. So that's the Nolledo book. And this is T. Casper's, Linda T. Casper's book. And may I ask Linda a question since she is with us? Is that cool?
Sure, sure.
So Linda, how does it feel to have this attention? I know you have been writing and have made such a great name, but how do you feel now that you have this book coming out, and then there's a whole lot of other reprints and attention given to you? How do you?
It kind of feels strange, because I really am surprised that people are interested still. Because when I started writing, I was just what they called saling pusa, I just tagged along when Len went to conferences and workshops. And I was surprised when Bert Florentino asked to publish some of my short stories. That's the first book. And he was such a good person that he tried to help me, I think. That's the Transparent Son. And then after that, my grandmother used to tell stories about the revolution and the Philippine-American War. And she said, somebody should write about this. But I didn't think she meant me. So I just went along and she also said, if it's meant to happen, it will happen. And I think it's meant to happen that I'll be a writer of historical fiction, because one thing led to another. I got to Widener Library one stormy day and found there were books about the Philippines I've never heard about, and some were derogatory. And I said, well, I should do something to confront that wrong messages. And well, as one thing led to another, I thought I'd write one book, a novel, because if I wrote essays, it would be in the library shelf, and nobody had taken those books out. So I said, just one book and that's it, and I'll go on with my life. But as it happened, there was enough material left that I started to work on The Three-Cornered Sun, which Mara likes so much. And I just looked at it again and I wondered, how did I write it? How did I get all those facts in my head and all those characters? And really just took years to start, to finish it, revise it again, type it, retype again. And as I said before, mentioned, NVM said you revised too much, and you took my first book, The Peninsulars, and brought it to bookmark. But anyway, I don't remember what happened to. See, I'm not happy. I don't remember all the details. But I'm happy I wrote The Three-Cornered Sun. If somebody else wrote it, I would still like it. Appreciate all the time, the people in there. My really purpose in writing historical books, novels, is so we will remember our history. So it will become part of us, part of our memory, part of our country's memory, and also part of the memory of the world. Otherwise, we would disappear, and Jose Rizal along with that too. He was my favorite. I used to be when we were students, and I was still growing up. And they said, what would you like to be when you grow up? And we always said, we want to be like Rizal. I don't know if I ever accomplished that, but I still would be happy if I did. And I'm grateful to Mara for bringing out Three Cornered Sun, which I had forgotten all the years working on it. And then, of course, there was so much material left that I started, I think, The Stranded Whale. But then martial law intervened. So I had to do those martial law books before history is revised for us.
Yes.
We have to keep our memories intact. We have to remember the past so that we can enter into the future the way we are. Something like that.
Thank you, Linda. So, do we have any other hands up? James, no?
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question for Linda. So, you've written so many novels of historical fiction, and then now it's come to you writing your own history and through your own memoirs that's coming out next year. And I was just wondering, what was it like for you to write your own story?
It's hard. I can't see, I did it so fast. I had 3 hip dislocations, a year and a half. And so when Cecilia asked if I would write my memoirs, there was nothing else to do but do it. Recovering from the hip and the whatever, I was restricted to one floor. I can't walk up and down. I can't go out easily. So anyway, that was probably, as my nanay said, if it's meant to happen, it will happen. So I had the dislocations so I could write the memoirs and not be distracted by anything else. I can't read it again. I don't know how I stayed with it those months, remembering from the start, growing up in Camarines before the war, up to now I'm 93. And that Mara's asked Gian to do that, whatever that was, the video. That kind of is a kind of closing. I think that's my last book. And I'm happy, but still, I don't think I can read it. It's so painful to read about all the people in my life who are no longer with me. But there's another life, and I hope we all meet together there. So thank you, Mara. Thank you, Cecilia, for thinking I could do these things. Bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, Linda. Mara, we're getting close to our 4 o'clock deadline. We've got about 10 minutes. Unless there's anybody else that wants to speak from our in-person audience or online, I'd like Mara to go ahead and do some closing remarks, and then I will close up our meeting with some closing remarks as well.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Yeah, who's this?
Yes.
I wanted to say something to Linda.
Sure. Just,
Linda,
yeah,
I've never read you, but I will now. And I'm Filipino, I know I don't look it. But I just have to thank you.
Carlene, can you just briefly introduce yourself? So for
Oh, my name is Carlene Sobrino Bonavere, and I am just thrilled. I'm 84 and having some problems. And I'm thinking it's over, and I'm listening to you, and I say, aha, I don't have problems. I've got time. I've got 10 more years. and I'm going to keep writing. And I have to thank you. And I love it was. I was trying to think of who it sounded like you're writing in the stadium, and I said it was the brothers Karamazov, my favorite writer, Dostoevsky. And I could hear them breathing. I could hear them sweating. They were alive. I really thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Courtney.
You're welcome.
And anybody else? Mara? You want-
Thelma?
Do I see anybody? So Mara, you want
You're mute.
closing remarks? Start speaking. You will be automatically focused on the speaker view.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I just want to thank everybody. Don't know if you guys can see me clearly. Okay, so I'd really just like to thank everybody and everybody who attended today. I always think about what Linda T. Casper said. History is our biography, literature is our autobiography. And I think I also agree with her. We have to always remember and we always have to bring out these stories. And whether it's, you know, the way Nolledo wrote and that it was about World War II, or if it's about 1896 and it's about family, there are just so many stories that need to that need to come out. And if and you know, so we at Exploding Galaxies, we're committed to finding more and more. So you know, and if you have any recommendations or any writers that you truly believe need urgent republication, although I know many of them already do, please feel free to just send me an email. I'd love to be in conversation with many of you. I'm happy to have met some of the people who attended today. And again, thank you to Linda T. Casper and Christina, and to the Nolledo family for being here today. Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, James. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you to Noel and Reme. And thank you to everybody. And this is an afternoon with Exploding Galaxies.
Thank you, Mara. So Carlos Bulusan is so honored to have partnered with you in putting together this meeting this afternoon, and we hope to continue that. And working with Cecilia, Noel for 2025. In fact, Cecilia has already tapped me to see if she can do, I think, a writing. She's publishing a book on writing.
We can do a
Workshop on it. So everybody for joining. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day, your night, or whatever, wherever you're from.
Yeah,
And good day. Thank you.
I mean, can you invite them to our next event?
Oh, sure. Well, we have our website, the carlosbulusanbookclub.org website. We have events there published. So please,
Yeah, but our open house coming up
oh,
December.
we have a big open house here for our Philippine Heritage Collection in the library. If you're here on Saturday, December 21st, please come by, drop by and visit. It's up from 10 to 4 in the afternoon. So it's an all-day event. So please join us. So I have,
Parole making workshop.
yes. So all the details of what's going on there, please on our website. Did you want to say something?
No.
No? Oh, okay. All right, so James, you can end the meeting. Thanks for everybody for joining. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.